It was past midnight when Marcus decided to take the old Highway 47 instead of the interstate. He'd driven this route 1,000 times during the day, but never this late. The road stretched endlessly before him, swallowed by darkness beyond his headlights' reach. The radio had died 20 miles back, leaving only the hum of tires on asphalt and the occasional groan of his aging pickup truck. Marcus rubbed his eyes, fighting the fatigue that came with a 12-hour shift at the factory. That's when he saw her. A woman stood on the shoulder, her white dress almost glowing in the beam of his headlights. Her thumb was out, her face obscured by long, dark hair that hung like curtains around her features. Something about her posture seemed wrong, too still, too rigid. But Marcus was a decent man. He couldn't just leave someone stranded out here. He slowed the truck and rolled down his window. "Need a ride?" She didn't speak. She simply walked around to the passenger side and climbed in. The cabin temperature dropped instantly, as if he'd opened a freezer door. Marcus cranked up the heat, chalking it up to the November chill. "Where you headed?" he asked, pulling back onto the highway. Silence. He glanced over. She sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, staring straight ahead. Her dress was soaked. No, not just damp, but dripping. Water pooled at her feet, darkening the worn carpet of his truck. "Are you okay? Were you in an accident or something?" Her head turned toward him slowly, mechanically, like a door on rusty hinges. And when her hair fell away from her face, Marcus's blood turned to ice. Her eyes were completely white. No pupils, no irises, just blank, milky orbs. Her skin had a grayish-blue tint, and her lips were the color of old bruises. Water dripped from her mouth when she finally spoke. "Exit 34. That's where I died." Marcus's foot slammed on the brake. The truck skidded, fishtailing across both lanes before he regained control. His heart hammered against his ribs. When he looked at the passenger seat again, it was empty. Completely empty. The only evidence she'd been there at all was the puddle of water on the floor and the smell. Salt and decay, like something pulled from the bottom of a lake. Marcus didn't stop driving until he reached a 24-hour diner 30 miles down the road. His hand shook as he ordered coffee. The waitress, a weathered woman named Doris, noticed his pale face. "You look like you seen a ghost, honey." I think I did." The words tumbled out. The hitchhiker, her dead eyes, the way she just vanished. Doris's expression darkened. She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat down across from him. "Let me guess. Exit 34? Marcus nodded, unable to speak. 20 years ago, Doris began. A young woman named Sarah Mitchell was driving home from her sister's wedding. It was raining hard that night. She lost control near exit 34, went through the guardrail and into the reservoir. They didn't find her body for 3 weeks. Jesus. People see her all the time on that stretch of highway, always between midnight and 3 a.m., always wearing that white bridesmaid dress. She gets in the car, asks to go to exit 34, and then Doris made a disappearing gesture with her fingers. Vanishes. Marcus looked down at his coffee, his reflection distorted on the dark surface. Why? Why does she keep doing that? Who knows? Maybe she's trying to get home. Maybe she doesn't know she's dead. Or maybe... Doris leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Maybe she's trying to warn people about something worse out there on that highway. Marcus never took Highway 47 again. But sometimes, late at night when he couldn't sleep, he'd wonder about Sarah Mitchell. Wonder if she was still out there, thumb extended, water dripping from her bridesmaid dress, waiting for the next driver foolish enough to stop.
Jake had been a long-haul trucker for 15 years. He'd seen it all, or so he thought. Blizzards in Montana, dust storms in Arizona, fog so thick in Oregon you could barely see your own hood. But nothing prepared him for what happened on Interstate 80 through Nevada. It was 2:47 a.m. when he first noticed the convoy. Three 18-wheelers, running in perfect formation about a quarter-mile ahead. Their taillights burned an unusual shade of amber, not quite red, not quite orange, but something in between that made Jake's eyes water when he looked at them too long. That was the first strange thing. The second was their speed. Jake was pushing 75, maybe 80 on the downhills, but he couldn't gain on them. They maintained the exact same distance no matter how hard he pushed his rig. The third thing, and this is what made the hair on the back of his neck stand up, was that he couldn't see their license plates. The lights illuminated the trucks perfectly, but where the plates should have been, there was only darkness. Not shadow, not dirt, but pure, absolute blackness that seemed to absorb light. Jake tried to raise them on the CB radio. "Hey, convoy ahead, this is Blue Thunder. You fellas got your ears on?" Static. Then, underneath the white noise, something else. Voices, maybe. Whispering in a language Jake didn't recognize. The words slithered through the speaker like snakes. He switched channels. The whispering followed. Okay, that's enough of that. Jake turned off the radio entirely. His hands were sweating on the steering wheel. The convoy ahead began to slow, not gradually, but all at once, as if they were all being controlled by the same brain. Jake eased off the gas, letting the distance grow between them. Every instinct screamed at him to exit, to stop, to do anything but follow these trucks. But there were no exits. Not for another 40 miles, according to his GPS. That's when the convoy stopped, completely. They just stopped, right in the middle of the interstate. No hazard lights, no warning, three massive rigs sitting motionless in the right lane. Jake's headlights washed over them as he approached. He moved into the left lane to pass, his pulse pounding in his ears. As he drew level with the first truck, he made the mistake of looking at the cab. The driver's seat was empty. So was the second truck's, and the third. All three rigs sat there with their engines idling, their cargo doors closed, and absolutely nobody at the wheel. Jake's foot hit the accelerator. His rig lurched forward, engine roaring. He had to get past them, had to get away from whatever impossible thing was happening here. That's when all three trucks turned their headlights on him. The beams were blinding, searingly bright, like staring into the sun. Jake threw up his hand to shield his eyes, nearly losing control of his rig. The light burned through his eyelids, through his hand, seeming to pierce straight into his brain. He saw things in that light, things that shouldn't exist. Vast, empty spaces between the stars, highways that stretched across dimensions, connecting places that had no names in any human language, and travelers, things that looked almost like trucks, almost like vehicles, but were actually something else entirely. Something that fed on distance and time and the loneliness of long-haul drivers who spent too many hours alone in the dark. When the light finally released him, Jake was doing 95 and climbing. The speedometer needle trembled as it pushed past 100. In his mirrors, the three trucks had vanished as if they'd never been there at all. Jake pulled into the first truck stop he found and didn't come out until the sun was high in the sky. Other drivers came and went, complaining about traffic and weather and dispatch. Normal problems, human problems. He sold his rig 3 weeks later and took a job at a warehouse. He never drove at night again. But sometimes, when he lies awake in bed, he can still see those amber lights burning in his memory. And he wonders if they're still out there on Interstate 80, maintaining their perfect formation, waiting for the next driver to get curious. Waiting to show them what really travels the highways when the world is sleeping.
Emma's phone was down to 3% battery when she saw the sign, "Rest Area, 1 mile." She'd been driving for 6 hours straight, fleeing a bad breakup and worse memories. The plan was to drive through the night, reach her sister's place in Colorado by morning. But exhaustion was catching up with her, making her eyelids heavy and her reactions slow. The rest stop would be perfect, just 20 minutes. A power nap, a bathroom break, maybe some coffee from a vending machine. then back on the road. She took the exit. The rest area was smaller than she expected. Just a small parking lot with a single building, its fluorescent lights flickering weakly against the darkness. There were 3 other cars in the lot, which was reassuring. She wasn't completely alone out here. Emma parked under one of the lights and grabbed her phone charger before heading to the bathroom. The building was old, probably built in the 70s and not updated since. Cracked tile, graffiti-covered stalls, and a smell that made her nose wrinkle. But it was the silence that bothered her most. No footsteps, no running water, no sounds of other people at all. "Hello?" Her voice echoed off the tiles. No answer. Emma did her business quickly, washed her hands, and headed back outside. That's when she noticed something that made her stomach clench. The 3 cars that had been in the parking lot were still there, in the exact same positions, with their engines running and their headlights on, and nobody inside them. Emma's walk became a jog, then a run. She fumbled with her keys, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped them. Behind her, she heard a sound that made her blood freeze. Footsteps. Not normal footsteps, but dozens of them, all perfectly synchronized. She risked a glance over her shoulder and wished she hadn't. People were emerging from the shadows at the edge of the parking lot. They walked in perfect unison, their movements jerky and wrong, like marionettes being pulled by invisible strings. Their heads all tilted at the same angle, their arms all swung in the same rhythm, and they were all smiling. The same smile, wide and empty and hungry. Emma's car door wouldn't open. She yanked at the handle, sobbing now, as the footsteps got closer. They were maybe 20 feet away, 15, 10. The lock clicked. She threw herself inside, slammed the door, jammed the key into the ignition. The engine turned over once, twice, and died. "No, no, please!" The figures surrounded her car. Up close, she could see they wore normal clothes, jeans, t-shirts, jackets. They could have been anyone. Soccer moms, college students, retirees. But their eyes were all wrong, flat and black like a doll's eyes. One of them pressed its face against her window. That terrible smile never wavered. Then it spoke, and its voice came from everywhere at once, from inside the car, from the radio, from her own chest, as if her body was a speaker for something else's words. "Stay with us. Rest. You're so tired. You've been driving for so long. Just close your eyes. We'll take care of everything." The other figures began to rock the car gently, like they were trying to lull a baby to sleep. Back and forth, back and forth. The motion was almost soothing. Emma's eyelids grew heavy. Maybe they were right. Maybe she should just rest for a while. No. She cranked the key again, flooding the engine. The figures' smiles faltered for just a second, their heads tilting in confusion. That single instant of hesitation was all Emma needed. The engine roared to life. She threw the car into reverse and slammed the accelerator. The figures scattered, or seemed to. In her mirror, she saw them fold and bend in ways that human bodies shouldn't, their limbs breaking and reforming as they moved. Emma didn't stop speeding until she was 50 miles down the highway. She pulled into a well-lit, crowded truck stop, parked directly under the brightest light she could find, and called her sister with shaking fingers. "Emma, it's 4 a.m. What? Don't ever stop at rest areas alone, Emma. Promise me. Swear you'll never stop at a rest area alone at night." 2 weeks later, Emma saw a news story online. A woman's body had been found at a rest stop on the same highway Emma had taken. She'd been dead for 3 days, but her car's engine was still running. The police said it looked like she'd simply fallen asleep at the wheel in the parking lot. But Emma knew better. She'd fallen asleep somewhere else entirely.
somewhere the smiling people lived, and she'd never woken up.
Every highway has its legends, stories passed between drivers like currency, the ghost hitchhiker, the phantom trucker, the stretch of road where compasses spin and electronics fail. But mile marker 239 on Route 666, renamed Route 491 years ago, though the old number still appeared on some maps, had a reputation that made even skeptical drivers nervous. David Marsh didn't believe in ghost stories. He was a man of science, a physicist teaching at a small college in New Mexico. When his colleague mentioned that she always went 20 miles out of her way to avoid mile marker 239, David had laughed. "It's just a road, Linda."
Then why does everyone who stops there see something?
Confirmation bias. People expect to see something, so they do. It's dark, they're tired, their minds fill in the blanks. Linda had shaken her head. "You're not listening. Everyone sees the same thing, the exact same thing." That intrigued David enough to make him curious. So when he had to drive through that area for a conference, he made a point of stopping at mile marker 239. It was 11:47 p.m. The moon was a thin crescent, providing almost no light. David pulled onto the shoulder, put the car in park, and waited. For 5 minutes, nothing happened. He checked his phone, no signal, which wasn't surprising out here. The temperature gauge in his car showed 72 degrees, comfortable enough. Then, exactly at midnight, according to his watch, everything changed. The temperature plummeted, his breath misted in the air. The car's interior lights dimmed, and something moved in his peripheral vision. David turned his head slowly. There was a child standing beside his car. A boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old, wearing pajamas printed with cartoon characters. His feet were bare. He stared at him with huge, dark eyes. "Are you lost?" David asked, his scientific mind already racing. "A prank? A very elaborate hoax?" The boy didn't answer. He just pointed down the highway, back the way David had come. "What's that way?" He followed the gesture. "Is that where you live?" The boy shook his head slowly. He pointed again, more insistently this time. Against his better judgment, David got out of the car. The cold was shocking after the warm evening. It had to be 30 degrees colder than it had been 2 minutes ago. "Hey, buddy, are you okay? Where are your parents?" The boy began to walk down the highway, still pointing. David followed, keeping a few feet back. Every instinct told him this was wrong, that he should get back in his car and drive away. But what if this kid really needed help? They walked for maybe 100 yards. Then the boy stopped and pointed at something on the side of the road. It was a memorial marker, one of those small white crosses people put up when someone dies in an accident. Fresh flowers sat at its base, white roses, not yet wilted. David knelt to read the inscription. "Tommy Marsh, age 9, taken too soon. We love you forever." Marsh. His last name was Marsh. His blood turned to ice. He stood up slowly and turned to face the boy. "Who are you?" The child's mouth opened, but the voice that came out wasn't a child's voice. It was older, layered with dozens of other voices all speaking at once. "We are everyone who died here. We are the 37 who went off the cliff in the bus. We are the family of 5 who burned. We are the hitchhiker who was murdered. We are the couple who lost control in the storm. We are everyone, and we're waiting." "Waiting for what?" The boy smiled, and it was the most terrible thing David had ever seen. "For you to join us." David ran. He ran faster than he ever run in his life, his heart slamming against his ribs. Behind him he heard footsteps, not just one pair, but dozens. He risked a glance back and saw them. Figures emerging from the darkness on both sides of the highway. Men, women, children. Some wore clothes from decades past. Some were burned, some were broken. All of them walked with the same purposeful stride, all heading toward him. David's car seemed impossibly far away. The more he ran, the further it got, as if the highway itself was stretching. His lungs burned, his legs cramped. He was 50 years old, out of shape, and these things, whatever they were, weren't slowing down. Just when he thought his heart would burst, he felt pavement under his feet. Then his hands found the car door. He threw himself inside, locked the doors, and turned the key. Nothing. No, no, no! The dead surrounded his car. They pressed against the windows, their faces blank, their eyes hungry. The boy in pajamas stood directly in front of the hood, still pointing down the highway. "Join us," the voices whispered. "Stay. Rest. You're already here. You never left." David looked at his hands on the steering wheel. They were pale, too pale. And was that a steering column piercing his chest? He looked down and saw the engine started. David didn't question it. He threw the car into drive and floored it. The figures didn't move. His car passed straight through them like they were made of smoke. He drove until dawn, not stopping until he reached the conference center. In the bathroom, he splashed water on his face and stared at his reflection. He looked normal, alive, real. But he couldn't shake the image that had appeared for just an instant when he'd looked down in the car, the impossible vision of a steering column punched through his ribs, of dashboard plastic embedded in his face, of the way a body looks after a high-speed collision with... David pulled up the news on his phone. He searched for accidents on Route 491, mile marker 239. The most recent article was from 3 days ago. A man driving home from a conference had lost control of his vehicle at mile marker 239. His car had gone off the road. The vehicle wasn't found for 2 days. The man's name was David Marsh. David dropped his phone. It clattered on the tile floor. In the cracked screen he could see his reflection. And standing behind him, barely visible in the glass, was the boy in pajamas. Still pointing down the highway, still waiting for David to understand that he'd never actually left mile marker 239, that he was still there, in the crumpled wreckage of his car, dying slowly while his mind created this elaborate fantasy of escape. Still there, forever. The boy in the mirror smiled. And David Marsh finally understood why everyone who stopped at mile marker 239 saw the same thing. Because none of them ever really left.